So I'm Simon Zagata. I am a white male with a blue shirt, short, lightish brown hair, and blue eyes. And I'm here with Maysoon Zayid. She is a comedian, an organizer, an activist. Insert a bunch of titles for all the things she does.
I'm not an activist. I am not an activist. I'm not an activist. I'm an advocate. And the difference between an advocate and an activist is that advocates shower. Yeah. Also, I want to share my audio description because apparently that's a really controversial thing to do. And Kamala Harris just got eaten alive for giving her audio description. So my name is Maysoon. I look like the lost Kardashian. I have long black hair, cinnamon skin, and I shake wildly.
Maysoon, if you're the lost Kardashian, I'm just waiting for the news that you're dating a basketball player, and I'm curious.
I know. I'm waiting. I'm waiting to see if I can get any of the old timers after their wife either divorces them or passes away.
Steph Curry's dad is just going to call you. And say,
no, I'm talking old timers like Magic Johnson or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I need someone of that generation.
See, when you say, I'm a Michigan State graduate, so when you say Magic Johnson, I walk my dogs past his statue. I think that's a great choice.
Yeah, it is.
So we're here today to talk a little bit about Disability Pride Month. My first question is always, Maysoon, do you prefer identity first language or person first language?
I've written extensively on this topic. I'm an identity first person. So first of all, I'm not a person with a disability. I'm not a person with CP. I'm a disabled person. With implies that I could leave it. So like, I can't just be like, hey, I'm going to the prom without my CP today. I'm not with my disability. We have broken up and I don't do that anymore. You can't do that, right? So the second thing is that like the negative connotation of disability is from the non-disabled community. So I think that when people like me identify as being disabled first, we take away the stigma of that. And also euphemisms, I hate euphemisms. And I do like a comedy bit about this, that like, I'm not differently abled. I can't like fly or talk to cats. I wish I could talk to cats. I can't talk to cats. And I'm also not special needs. My needs are not special, they're high maintenance. And like what I want people to understand about the word disabled is we will always be labeled that. So we get to choose whether that's a positive or a negative. And I call us the disco, hashtag disco. We added a disco ball to the emojis this year, which I think is much more inclusive than a wheelchair symbol. And why do I call the disability community disco? First three letters of that, first two letters of that, disco. And then we're the party. And so like, that's the only time I kind of euphemize disability is when I say disco, but that's more just because it's a better hashtag.
Hashtags definitely important. And I mean, honestly, so important in these days for community building and for not activism because we like to shower, but advocacy.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm not in any way mocking people who don't have the ability to shower themselves. No. I'm mocking people who choose not to. These are two different groups.
Oh, I totally understand that.
You know, I'm a Muslim, right? So I'm born and raised in the great state of New Jersey. I'm Palestinian by heritage. My faith is Muslim. So Muslims, we wash up 5 times a day and like pretty intensely. So when COVID hit and they were teaching people how to wash their hands, Muslim Americans were just like, they don't know how to wash their hands. Like, you know, it was a real awakening for me about how dirty some of my fellow Americans choose to be.
Yeah, I think you're right though, that I don't know, I think of granola when I hear activist who doesn't shower.
Exactly. Right. I'm not saying someone who's not given the personal care assistance that as a human right they should have and therefore can't shower for 3 days because the government decided that that was enough. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about exactly what you're talking about, like patchouli ain't soap. Is this the best disability pride non sequitur stream of consciousness conversation you've had?
I don't know. My first conversation was with two trans youth who were
Oh, wow, nice.
20 and 17 and working on going to college and talking about what they needed to succeed in that and their experience. And there are a lot of non sequiturs. So you have big shoes to
Oh,
fill.
they weren't going to get any of it.
Oh, they
So
had
I teach at Princeton.
okay.
And I've also taught at Arizona State University. So I taught stand-up comedy and writing and stuff like that. And I find it incredibly disheartening to see how many different universities I visit as a comedian who simply refuse to believe that accommodations are a right and not a way to get the outcome that you want. So they really don't picture it still to this day as leveling the playing field. They really picture it as, oh, well, you can't succeed if we don't give you this. So us giving you this guarantees you success and therefore removes the work. And, you know, I'm really blessed and lucky to be a big part of the conversation at Princeton and be surrounded by people who are proactive and who have the funds to have ASL interpreters at everything. But like I toured this entire country and I can't tell you how many disabled students groups I meet with that say the exact same thing. We had to work 10 times as hard as our non-disabled peers to get here. And now they're doing everything they can to force us out. I think after COVID, well, not after because it's just forever COVID, but the fact that they're abandoning hybrid as a method for inclusivity, especially for people with chronic pain and mental health issues. I have so many students that couldn't physically get to class but could turn on that mic and turn on that speaker and participate fully from their house under the covers, not dressed, like, you know, kind of leaning into the fact that they needed a mental health day, but still being able to participate because I created a way for them to do that. And just watching people abandon hybrid and abandon everything that we've learned and insist on mandatory attendance of wheelchair users at a snow-covered historic campus, it just seems ludicrous to me. So like I said, like I'm really blessed and lucky that both Princeton and Arizona State University are very disability forward, but in general, we work harder and are set up to fail.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the hybrid system because the two people I interviewed, that was the first thing on their minds.
Yeah.
When we talked about what accommodations or what designs would be helpful. And it's helpful for physical accessibility or if you're having a mental health day. I mean, these two people talked about having trouble mentally getting ready to go to school just because of in high school because of some of the things they went through there. And one went to a complete remote schooling program for their senior year and said, yeah, it was great. My grades went up. It helped me prepare for college. And I agree. I don't see why we would be.
Like I said, the system exists, right? So like when people are like, oh no, but how will we proctor exams? The same way you did when you had to teach remote. Like each one of these schools at some point had to teach remote. So they all know how to do it. But it's just like, oh no, we can't.
Yeah. I took law school exams online. That technology exists. I think you could do it for an undergrad exam or a high school test.
Right. Yeah. But again, they don't see the benefit of including a quarter of the population. It's like you have to grind.
I hate the rise and grind terminology.
Well, I grind, like, to be fair, like I'm definitely from the older generation. Like if we didn't grind, we literally died. So like,
Yeah.
I admire today's generation being like, I have run out of spoons, ergo I'm going to lie down. And I'm like, I can't run out of spoons when I have a 6,000 person paid audience waiting for me to get on stage. So like, I try really hard to preach the like, stop when you need to stop. Don't ever put yourself at risk. But it's what I do, because my game, which is the Hollywood game, you don't get to be like, oh, I have chronic pain in my leg. And I actually like, I was shooting last Tuesday, and it was like humid, and like you were talking about the weather, and my cerebral palsy just went haywire. I had like double vision, my legs were aching, my chronic pain was like making me like a little vertigo, and I sat there and shot an entire episode. And I finished the episode and I got up and everybody was like, whoa, because even though I have cerebral palsy, I'm not usually like extremely wobbly. I always joke that it just looks like I'm like slightly drunk and people think I shouldn't drive. But I'm sober and I do. And they were shocked to see what I did. But like, I had been told very specifically, if we don't shoot on this day, the next option is February. I don't get to run out of spoons, you know,
Yeah.
and that's why I'm trying to build an empire that employs disabled people in the most effective way for those people. So I have a production company called Can Productions, and get it, CP, that's the initials, haha. So the mission of that is that we have 20% disabled crew. I have 100% on-air disabled presence in my project. Subsequent projects will be written by disabled people, starring disabled people, you know, and tackling both invisible and visible disabilities, because I think still to this day, non-disabled people don't understand that there's so many disabilities you can't see. And within the disability community, there's a lot of kind of infighting between like the visible and the invisible, and like, this is what I have to go through and that's what you have to go through. I'd rather be this and I'd rather be that, but I'm all inclusive. So I allow people to identify as disabled. And a lot of corporations ask me like, how do you know if you're hiring a disabled person? And I go, it's self-identification. Well, if they have an invisible disability, how do you know they're not faking? You know they're not faking because the majority of people are not faking. And we just happen to be caught in this cinematic / politicians want you to think that it's really easy to fake disability and that there's a lot of benefits. And it's not, because I have friends who are, you know, full-time wheelchair users on 18 different medications a day, and they have to jump through hoops to get any sort of social assistance, to get, you know, labeled as permanently disabled so that they can get whatever benefits. This idea that you slip on the sidewalk and you claim you hurt your neck and now you're getting, you know, $5,000 from the government every month is BS. It's not real. So the benefit of like faking a disability, sure, has someone done it in their lifetime? Obviously someone has, but in general, we're not doing this every day for your entertainment. So if someone says to me, I identify as disabled, I have ADHD, anxiety, and lupus, I'm not gonna be like, show me your medical papers, which brings me full circle to the fact that universities do tend to require medical proof. And this ignores three different things. One, it's expensive to go to a doctor. It's not easy to get to. Like, telemed has made it better, but still. Second thing is that some of us are not diagnosable. We're just not, you know, like if you take something like fibromyalgia, they're still trying to figure out how to diagnose it. And finally, it really just ignores this complicated relationship that disabled people have with doctors. Most doctors only study disability 2 weeks in their entire education. They don't know how to cater to a community that presents differently. I broke one bone in my entire life. It was my finger on my wedding, and they couldn't fix it because no one would listen to me. And I was like, you have to give me a Botox shot to paralyze the finger. Otherwise, it's going to shake within the cast and it's going to be crooked. And they just refused to believe me, broke my finger 3 times. So when you ask people like me to voluntarily go to the doctor because I'm not going to get an accommodation at a job unless I prove that my permanent disability, which is extensively documented online, is real, like, what kind of hoop is that? And I'm extremely privileged. I have insurance. I have, but I actually don't have a letter that says Maysoon Zayid has cerebral palsy. I don't have that letter. I went to a pediatrician. We all knew I had cerebral palsy, but there's nothing saying it. So the DMV in New Jersey makes me renew my permanent disability placard on my car every 2 years. The thing says permanent. Why am I renewing it?
Well, you're renewing it so that you have another hoop to jump through.
Right. And they require a doctor's letter. And the doctor requires you to come to the office. And because it's not a checkup and because it's not health related, it's not covered by insurance. So that's $250. And then if you're not like me and you don't drive like a fancy car or anything, then you either have to get an access ride or take a ride share. And that's an additional cost. And you maybe need time off school or time off work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a big reason representation matters so much, so that I don't think people realize, like you're saying, all the hoops. I just don't think they see it. So it's easier to have this story in your head of, oh, here's this person taking advantage of the system. And the system is not an advantage to be taken. And I don't think people realize that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, lucky me. I get to live below the poverty line. Like, you know, as I said, like you watch the movies and you think these people are able to buy like Rolls Royces and whatever else. I'm like, if you make more than like $1,200, you're getting stripped of all of your benefits, which cost maybe $30,000 a month.
Yeah. And last time I checked, they didn't make an accessible Rolls Royce. Maybe they should change that.
I bet you there is one. You want to know why? I'll tell you why. This is going to get me in trouble with everyone, disability community, Arab community, and the world. Saudis are very inbred. And there is a lot of disability. So the number one cause of disability in the Middle East, which is like war-torn and malnutrition, is actual intermarriage between cousins.
Oh, wow.
And they do this generationally, and it causes a lot of disabilities. So I refuse to work in Saudi. I have gotten several offers. I don't want to go work in a place where women aren't allowed to leave the house without a male guardian. I just don't want to do that. I think it's not what my religion states, and it's patriarchy just really doing bad things to my faith. I don't want to go. That being said, I went next door to Kuwait, and it was the most accessible country I have ever been in my entire life, because so many well-off people are disabled, and therefore that whole world is accessible to them, including the Rolls Royces and the jacuzzis and the airplanes. Like Kuwait Airlines has a wheelchair accessible bathroom. There are no wheelchair accessible bathrooms on United. There's none on Turkish Airlines. There's none on Singapore Air, but there are on Kuwait Airlines. So you can put your chair on the plane. You can take your chair to the bathroom, the opera houses, the restaurants, everything in that country is accessible. So that's why I think there's an accessible Rolls Royce, because Arab money. Every Valentine's Day, I write "Say No to Cousin Love" on my Facebook, and my American friends laugh and my Arab friends fight me.
Well, I'm happy to be the conduit to start another fight.
Well, this is great because you're in Michigan, which means a lot of my people are there.
Oh yeah, that was actually one of the questions I had on my list, is when is the Arab American Comedy Festival opening a branch in Dearborn?
So In 2009 and 2010, we did like a Dearborn one and we did like a California one. And then honestly, Dino Vidala, my partner in crime, who started the festival with me, the New York Arab American Comedy Festival, ArabComedy.com, now in its 19th year, unbelievable. We were such babies when we started this. We started the New York Arab American Comedy Festival post 9/11 and in the run up to the Iraq War to battle the negative images of Arabs in media and to remind them that we were like the OG gangsters of comedy. It was like Danny Thomas and Vic Tayback and Wendy Malick. And then all of a sudden we became terrorists on Homeland in 24. So that's why we started it. And like I said, we had things in Dearborn and we had things in California. And then Dean became the host of Sirius XM channel 127 Progress from 6 to 9 Drive. And then I have 7 jobs. So I'm the author of a comic book series that's launching in August of 2023 called Shiny Misfits, partnered with Scholastic to do the print version and partnered with Audible to do the audio version so that's accessible to blind people and people with intellectual disabilities and people who it's just easier to listen. I teach at Princeton. I'm working on a docu-series. I'm a political commentator. And so when you put all those things together, we just can't tour the way that we did in 2010. And I'm still like, my bread and butter is still public speaking. So prior to the pandemic, I flew 200 days a year. And like, I consider myself an expert with flying while disabled because it's a nightmare to fly when you're disabled in the United States. They're extremely cruel to disabled people. They break people's wheelchairs all the time and don't understand that you don't just go buy one at Kmart when it gets broken, you know. So I'm still number one, first and foremost, a touring comic.
Yeah, it makes sense that you're a little busy with all the things you're doing.
And I have so many other things, like I have a web series called Advice You Don't Want to Hear. I consult as a disability consultant for big firms that are trying to be more inclusive. So literally when you count them out, I have 7 jobs.
Yeah.
And you know why I have 7 jobs? Because it is very, very expensive to be disabled. Not a person with a disability, but a disabled person in the United States of America. And I'm trying very hard to survive in a country that when you lose the ability to take care of yourself because you don't have the financial income that I earn with 7 jobs, abuse is rampant in the care community.
Yeah, as someone who does what I do, I definitely know that and see that.
Tell your viewers I'm a comedian. Like, nothing I've talked about has been funny. I'm like, we're abused, we're poor, we're denied access. Happy Disability Pride Month, everyone.
Hey, I mean, that's real though. And honestly, so I was a full-time staff attorney here for over 2 years before I took on this other part where now I'm like half staff attorney, half media. And I feel like I've learned so much more about what actually goes on doing the media portion because I see more representation than just one client in front of me at a time.
Yeah. So when you took the bar, did they care if you had spoons or not?
No, they didn't.
They don't care.
They don't care. And they didn't care that like I couldn't type at the end because they kept the air conditioning at like 60 degrees. And
you froze out.
Yeah, they did try and freeze us out. And I don't know, the bar system is notoriously ableist.
Yeah.
But
again, higher education also notoriously ableist.
Yeah.
Like in my day, nobody cared that I couldn't fill the little circles on the SAT exam. And I remember getting a 1560 and being like, I never finished the test. And like knowing that if I had just gotten, because I'm an overachieving disabled person, right? Which brings me to, I'm sure your audience has heard this, but I need to repeat it for people. You do not have to be machines like us. Like we have chosen to be people who do what we do. But we really need to get to a point in this country where a disabled person's worth is not attached to their productivity. And I understand that that's capitalism by definition, but honestly, I've just seen way too many people be like, if you just give them the chance, they'll work harder than anyone else. We don't need to. Like, you don't have to be part of the machine to be worth survival, to be worth healthcare, to be worth dignity. And I think that that is not a conversation we have enough about. And that when you have someone like me, who's like a huge overachiever, because I was born to immigrant parents, and you don't get to just be lackadaisical when you have, you know, conservative Muslim Arab parents who are like, we fled a war-torn country so you could thrive. You are not becoming a dancer. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I really worry about being the model minority of disability, where it's like, she's proof you can do anything. No, I'm not proof that you can do anything. I can't perform cardiac surgery. I don't have the coordination for that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like, I think it's important that while we admit that like, we didn't have choices, we also still fight for others to have those choices. And I love to make fun of spoons, but they do have a purpose. I think that's when you do have a choice. When it's not really a choice between like, I can't pay rent if I don't do this, ergo I have to do this. It's like, okay, I'm not gonna go out and I'm gonna be pissed looking at Instagram pictures. But if I do this, I'm gonna wreck my body. So I think that like, when you look at the idea of reserving your energy for when it's most needed and accepting the fact that sometimes you do have to perform like a monkey when you have no energy left, is kind of a good way to look at that.
Yeah. We need a class on spoon management.
We need a class on communication within the disability community, because like, I love to make fun of spoons. And for a community that lacks energy, they have a lot of energy to go after me. You're part of the problem. I'm like, no, I'm just telling you the truth that you don't want to hear. That I literally don't get to not get on that plane because my back hurts. I can't. I have to get on the plane or else I can't pay the rent. Like, these two things are completely attached to each other, you know?
Yeah. And
then we have rampant racism in our community. Rampant racism. So images of disability that we see in media tend to be cisgendered, white, straight boys. We've kind of gotten lucky and gotten a couple of LGBTQ representations, but in general, the poverty community is left out. So like, I love the show Speechless. I love the show Special. I love seeing Steve Way on Rami, right? But like, who are those shows? Who are those people? What is that community? What communities remain underserved? What communities don't have access to these amazing like speech technologies that we're using on television? I'm not seeing the intersection enough of race. I'm not seeing the intersection enough of poverty. It's like a community in denial about the fact that one of our overlying defining things is poverty.
Do you think that Disability Pride Month can be an opportunity to address things like that?
No, I don't. I don't. I think, first of all, I think there's way too many months. They're like, you know, because again, I'm a public speaker and everyone hits me up in October. So what's October?
Yeah, October.
Is it October Disability Awareness Month?
It might be. There's an awareness month, and October also has some important anniversaries in it.
So we gotta pick one, make it one day like Martin Luther King Day. Sorry, I'm not comparing oppressions. I was just trying not to pick like a racist like Columbus. So I think we would be much more effective if we made January, if we made July 26th the day, right? Because then also in December, we have the International Day of People with Disabilities, which is really, really important because that's global. But like you said, we have things in October. Then there's cerebral palsy awareness in March. Then there's it's nobody's paying attention to us except for us. We're totally in this in a bubble and a vacuum right now. And 8830 was something really incredible to watch because that was a huge anniversary that got media coverage like I've never seen for the community. So I think if we had one day, and it totally makes sense that it's a day in the summer where nobody gets a day off school and they're like not even happy about it because I mean, you know, these are slim pickings. But if we had one day that was like American Disability Day, then we could really educate people. But remember, we're educating people who don't want to know because the fear of disability is real. So many people are afraid of becoming disabled. You know, I hear all the time, I'd rather be dead than disabled. I hear people say that all the time. Or people literally come up to me, say to my face, "You're so brave. I would totally kill myself if I was you." And I'm like, okay. And so they don't want to be exposed to us. They don't want to learn about us. They don't want us to be real and not faking it, because then that could happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that the month is helpful in any way. I think that a day would be really great.
Yeah, it's a marketing issue.
The marketing issue, then we're going into something totally different. It was silly to call it Disability Pride a month after Pride, because again, it sterilizes the community. And it's like, wait, is Disability Pride like disabled people who are LGBTQ? Like, that's very confusing to me.
Yeah, so one thing that stuck out to me is mentioning fear of becoming disabled. Do you think more exposure, whether people want it or are afraid of it or not, can help with that and help people understand?
Yes, I'm 100% convinced that positive images save lives. I really genuinely believe that. So like the reason that I started doing Arab comedy and the festival that we mentioned before was that like Muslims and Arabs, which is not synonymous, you can be Arab in any faith, you can be Muslim in any nationality, but we were being so vilified and dehumanized that the community was facing violence. And the idea of showing these positive images was to let people know, not only should you not fear us, you should fight for us. And that's the same thing with disability. I feel like, I always cared about the disco first, right? And I remember growing up and seeing every disabled, visibly disabled, because we have no idea how many people with invisible disabilities were on our TVs. It's too stigmatized. But I remember seeing every visible character that had disability be healed on the red carpet. They'd be disabled on screen, then they'd be healed on the red carpet. And I tell a story when I do my talks about the first image I ever saw was from a show called La House on the Prairie. And there was this blind character who gets caught in an explosion and gets his sight back. And I remember being like, should I blow myself up? And FBI, I'm speaking in context right now. And I think for the disability community, it's two different things. Negative images make us feel like we don't belong. If I never see myself on the red carpet, that means I can never be part of that world. And then seeing people harm themselves to heal themselves could really trigger the community to harm themselves to heal themselves. And seeing movies that make it like, oh, the disabled character died and now their girlfriend is finally free and gets to live the life that he always dreamed for her, but he was such a burden. Like, if we reframe that, we start telling our own stories and we go out there and make you less afraid, but also more intrigued. Like the stuff that I work on, I'm working on like a top secret show. And when I pitched the show, everyone was like, that's so depressing. Who's going to watch it? And then when we shot the show, everybody was laughing, just laughing the entire time. And they were like, we didn't know that the stuff that you talked about could actually be funny and accessible. And like one of the things we talked about on that show was like, 80% of Americans polled, and I know all polls are made up or whatever, but 80% said they wouldn't date a disabled person. So like, I was like, okay, so you'd never date Britney Spears.
Yeah.
And people are like, Britney Spears is not disabled, she's crazy. And I'm like, Britney Spears has severe mental health issues, was forced under a guardianship, like so many other disabled people that don't have free will in this country. But you don't think of us as that. You think of us as little white boys with blankets on our legs in little wheelchairs begging you to save our lives at St. Jude's. And I love St. Jude's, and you should all give all your money to St. Jude's. They are miraculous. I do adore them. And I love the Shriners too. But that's not all of us. And I do believe like Disability Pride Month, disability awareness, CP awareness, that's not working. That I want one day. But I think if you're making a TV show in this day and age, and you don't have at least one character that's not coded as disabled, but actually disabled, autistic, blind, open about their eating disorder, whatever it is, then you're doing something very wrong, because we are a huge slice of this population. We have the buying power of China, $8 trillion. 1 in 3 American households includes a disabled person. So we're an untapped market that is like just dying for positive representation. I also think that positively representing disability gives hope to parents who think there is no hope, and maybe will encourage them to get their child a speaking device, or to get to allow their child to date. There's a clash, right? I'm talking about all the bad things in the disco. The racism is the worst part of it. But there's a clash between non-disabled parents of disabled children and disabled adults. We're always clashing online. And one of the fights I've gotten into is a lot of people don't want their disabled children to date. And not because they're conservative Muslims like my parents, because Muslim girls don't date, we get married, but because they don't see their disabled child as an adult. They think of them as these happy snowflake angel babies that never grow up. And I think it would be really good for parents to see like, oh, that person has my child's disability and they're married. That person has my child's disability and they became a mom. That person has my child's disability and they climbed a mountain. Super Crips get a bad rap. That's disabled people who do extraordinary things like climb Mount Kilimanjaro with like no limbs. That's okay if that's what inspires you to think that this is not just, I'm not just going to sit on Facebook all day and cry about what a burden it is to be a special needs mom so that all my friends can tell me how brave I am.
Yeah, I can see where that would clash, because to be honest, I don't know, a lot of people, but I know I've dealt with like ableist thoughts and feelings. I'm sure a lot of people do, but so I'm about to become a dad in November.
Oh, wow.
And like, I'm ashamed to admit it, but I have to. After working in this job, one of my thoughts was, wow, look at all these things I'm helping my clients with and all the things they have to jump through hoops to get. I hope my child doesn't have to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that was a hard thing to admit to myself, but once I admitted I was feeling that way, I could examine why and say, well, okay, you've also seen, all these examples of disabled people who, are self-advocates and are doing work as adults and living these lives that you would be proud of anyone to lead. Why are you so worried?
You're so worried because I'm not telling you what you feel, but I think one of the really valid worries that we all have is this is an uphill battle, and it should not be. Like, this should be very like intuitive with progress, that the world become more accessible and more inclusive. but we're really being faced with fascism up close and personal globally. Globally, there's a fight between supremacy and equality. And the disabled community, no matter how much we want to trick ourselves, the supremacists are never on our side. Like you can see like a couple of supremacists rolling around in wheelchairs, and you're like, well, I mean, they accept that wheelchair guy. That's the first guy they got rid of. That was the first guy gone. Everyone else who did the same garbage that the one wheelchair user who I wanted gone, he was gone. No one else was gone. So just supremacy and disability are inherent enemies. An ideology that wants the best only can never include us. Even though like, I know I'm like the best, whatever. To them, I'll always be inferior. Disability will always be inferior in a supremacy lens. So your fear is valid because we are actively fighting against supremacy in 2022, whether you're in Brazil or India or Saudi Arabia or Indiana or Ohio, it's everywhere. And so the fear is real, but the power of advocates to make it better for the next generation is also real. The Star Wars aspect of the internet, you know, social media having a light and dark side where you're bullied constantly, but also I'm seeing people on TikTok that grew up with Facebook, grew up with all this stuff. They are loud, proud, disabled people. They're educating other disabled people their age, like your guests that you talked about. And they are able to be fully themselves as disabled people in a way that I've never seen before because media has become more accessible. Like websites get it. They're captioning everything. And maybe it's because people wanted to watch stuff at work without getting caught and couldn't listen. But everything's being captioned now. Screen readers are a known thing. And whenever you design anything, people start talking about it. So like, while I'm still trying to explain to people that I'm performing live for that, no, I can't just stand this one time. And no, I can't hold the handheld mic. I'm not having to do that when I do virtual shows. Do you know, like I'm wearing socks, you know, and I can't do that when I go on stage. And that's a really big difference in my chronic pain to be able to do an hour interview with you super comfortably from my house. So the internet is moving faster than the real society.
That's, again, going back to that interview I've referenced a couple times, their advice to disabled students, disabled high schoolers was to find that community and use the internet to do that. I recently, and I think it's just really helping show that disabled people are not a monolith. The crit punk movement on TikTok right now is doing a huge thing to show that.
Yeah, and I mean, what's so cool about those movements is that they're super mainstream. Like the people who follow like the big disabled influencers, they're not one thing because of the intersectionality, whether you're intersecting with punk or Black Lives Matter. You know what I mean? It matters, but everything is working to stop us, right? So as we're excelling, we're still hearing like, oh, we're going to make sure we take away as much of the assistance that disabled people get as possible. Oh, we're going to also make sure that it's really hard for disabled people to go, oh, hey, we're just going to send CPS, you know, and I'm sure you're prepared and ready and know this. We're just going to send CPS to the hospital anytime a disabled person has a child under the assumption that they can't take care of it. So like you or I will get the visit that our non-disabled, like junkie friend won't get. Now, junkie is a terrible word. It was ableist. Addiction is a disability. I shouldn't have said what I said. But what I was trying to say is that like very unfit people are not checked the way that disabled people are.
Yeah, and we see that as an issue the other way too, where parents of disabled children will request support, and not receive it. and then finally something happens where, because
They lack the support.
they lack the support, and finally something happens where the child hasn't been getting the support they need, and the child ends up in a psychiatric hospital, and CPS and the state are coming and saying, well, if you want your child treated in a psychiatric hospital or in an institution, which they shouldn't be in because they should have gotten the support in the first place, you're going to have to give up your parental rights. And the child will become a ward of the state. And so it's just hitting from both sides, like taking kids from disabled parents and taking disabled kids from parents, because
and then pretending like anyone's adopting all the disabled kids in foster care. So when they're like, so we're stripping everyone of the right to abortion, and we're doing it because we're going to save all those poor disabled babies that are being aborted. And I'm like, yeah, no, you're actually not, because I see what's in the system. I know what's in the system, and it's us.
The overwhelming majority of kids in foster care are disabled kids.
Yeah.
And it's not because everybody's rushing to adopt them.
No. But also, how many of them ended up in foster care because the biological parents weren't given the support that they needed. And at the same time, we have 3 minutes left, so I love to end on death. Nothing makes me happier. At the same time, I know, and I can make it funny. At the same time, our deaths are excused in media. So when, there's a day of mourning for disabled people who are killed by their parents and caretakers. And the assumption is that parents always want what's best for their kids, that they're not forcing them to pass, that they're not abusive, and that's not the reality. Now, if you murder a healthy child, rightfully, the media drags you. Monster, murderer, don't ever let him out. If you murder your child and they're disabled, autistic, or severely mobility, constrained, you will have newspapers say, like, the mother was at the end of her rope. She just wanted her child to go to heaven. She wanted the suffering to end. The only time the media lionizes and martyrizes and lifts up a mother that murders her own child is when that child is disabled. So that conversation has to change. And our deaths have to stop being seen as mercy and start being seen as murder.
Agreed. Drag child murderers no matter what. That's our message for
all murder. 50% of all Americans killed by law enforcement are disabled. That's not a poll. That's an actual statistic that people can check me on. 50%. We're only 20% of the population. We're 50% of the people that are killed by law enforcement. So it's not just children, it's also adults.
Yep. And that is disabled people who we know have a disability.
Yeah.
So
that all those numbers are higher.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Maysoon. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a really great conversation.
Can we just let everyone know that if they want to learn more about me or just laugh and not really think, they can go to Maysoon.com, spelled like the month of May is coming soon, Maysoon.com. And everything is there: Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. You can pick your poison. Instagram, I'm like a fun, stylish, disabled chick. Twitter, I'm an angry crip. Facebook, I'm just promoting my shows and helping you go. So you can pick your poison.
Yeah, go to Maysoon's website, follow her on all of her social media. And is it ArabComedy.com?
ArabComedy.com, November 17th to the 19th at Gotham Comedy Club in New York City. We're doing it live, 19 years.
All right, I will send my sister and brother-in-law. I will be busy caring for a newborn, but
inshallah, best of luck.
2023, here I come.
I hope so. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Maysoon. I really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time.